Hi, thank you, El. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
okay, great. One never knows. Well, thank you very much for the invite today. It's always nice to be there in person, but actually, picking up on some of the polls you've run so far, I couldn't have been here if it was in person. So I was being vaccinated yesterday, and I'm teaching this afternoon. So the benefits of the new world, not to mention the tons of carbon that we've saved, we need to focus on those as some of the obvious challenges. So if we move on in the slides, I'm not going to. I'm probably going to echo and reinforce, and then one more. Probably going to echo and reinforce most of what has already been said by other speakers this morning, rather than add much new. I know others are going to speak about context, and it's already done so. But I guess I would just reinforce not some of the acute things, which, let's face it, you'll be much more aware of than am I as a researcher. You're at the front line of this every day. But I would stress the way that some of these acute challenges that you're facing right now might spin out into longer term consequences. So just thinking about things like the scarring effects of early unemployment for young people, the fiscal constraints that are likely to come down the line, the catalytic effect that I think some of the current crisis will have in relation to sectoral and occupational change, uptake of technology and so on, hastening some of those challenges that Annette just spoke about, but also some of the positive elements. I mean, we've been talking for many, many years about the possibility of, or the potential of, greater flexibility and how modern lifestyles demand that flexibility. But in large part, I'm not sure employers had always fully welcome that. But the last year has demonstrated that people can work in more flexible ways. They can balance multiple roles and responsibilities at the same time, perhaps in too extreme a way, but nevertheless, that has been demonstrated. And given that I am a professor of politics to some extent, I would just stress that we often see PES as primarily a kind of economic institution about promoting economic growth and inclusive growth. But I would stress that I think there's very, very good evidence now that on the linkages between things like insecurities at the household level and populism and nationalism and disintegrative forces internationally, and therefore PES services are at the front line of kind of social cohesion as well as economic effects. And that really is important when we talk about things like customer service, which sounds quite banal, but it is really central to how people feel about their experiences of engaging with the state, often at a point where they feel insecure. So PES have a much bigger role than just an economic one. If we forward on one slide, please. So given those challenges, I think it's a good idea it's a good point in time to think big in terms of future of PES reform. And most of the ideas in the framing paper for this conference will be ideas that are familiar, that are already shaping processes of reform. But I think it's no longer controversial, is it, to say that the labour market is a complex web of institutions and relationships, that neither employers nor job seekers are single organizations. Employers exist in complex networks of supply chains, consumer relationships, competitor relationships, embedding in their local community. Job seekers are engaged in, that are part of households. They're not individuals. So they have multiple responsibilities. And if PES are going to be effective moving forward, they have to, yes, focus on activation where that's appropriate and necessary, but recognise also the need to facilitate a wider set of transitions. And in all that, I think co-creation at the level of individual services will become much more important, or ought to become much more important, how we think about PES services. Individual employers and individual job seekers are often the best experts in what they need at that particular point in time. So co-creating a package of tailored services around their needs is increasingly important. And I would say this, as I've said it many times in the past, that inclusive governance approaches the role of social partners and a range of other stakeholders for labour market policy important to engage in the kind of macro level of design of services, both at a local level, because labour markets aren't national, they're often very differentiated at a local level, as well as the national level. If we move on one slide then.
2 more minutes.
Okay, so to some extent, all those contexts are going to bring change in service user needs. They're going to mean that working with higher skilled people, engaging much more seriously rather than rhetorically with lifelong learning. And they're going to mean taking up of more technology. So if we move one slide further on, and I'll just finish with this slide then, is that technology is central both to the need for partnerships, but also to facilitating their success. And at a kind of very granular level, I'm sure we've all been, we've all learned this year to do more in terms of using technology to collaborate both within and outside organizations in as ways as simple as sharing documents and communicating like this. But also the technology will be central to those new growth sectors. PES have a role, I think, in, if we move on one more slide, sorry, a role in facilitating technology uptake, both among employers and job seekers. So the triage of whether job seekers are able to use PES services online or digitally is really good to identify where people need new skills to be able to engage with new technology, but also the kind of big data transparency about changing nature of skills demands. PES will often look at people like us as researchers for skills forecasts, but what we know when you talk to employers about their long-term skills needs is they often don't know. They know what they need now and over the next course of the next year. And that, I think, places PES right at the front line of collecting and sharing that data, both for job seekers and for employers and training providers in terms of trying to respond to changing skills needs. So there's a lot more to say about all that, but I'll cut it there because we're a bit short on time.